Well, human beings, PowerGamer here. Back when I played the first Metroid game, I was abducted by aliens and they did funny things to my head. Now, the doctor said to prevent anything like this from happening again, I should just not play Metroid games anymore, but I'm sorry, I have to. We all have the must-play Metroid gene inside of us. It's human nature. Or at least it is for people on my mother's side of the family.
Metroid II: Return of Samus, the third entry in Nintendo's lineup of derivative sequels to their big NES trio. The second game in the Metroid series, in case you forgot how numbers worked like I did last week.
Oh, right, 75 comes after 3.
This game isn't really discussed as often as the first one, or at least it wasn't until it was remade twice, and like I said, it kinda fits into the same camp as Mario 2 or Zelda 2 in that it was pretty different from the first entry. Though in this case, it was less in gameplay and more in release, since this was the only one of those to not be on the NES, though you could also count Kid Icarus into this camp, but I don't even think Nintendo themselves would. The game was developed by the same team as the original Metroid, with the late great Gunpei Yokoi serving as a producer and directing duties being held by Hiroji Kiyotake and Hiroyuki Kimura. Rather than releasing it on the NES, they decided to make it for the Game Boy because they wanted to show off what that console could really do if people put their minds to it. I mean, this was released only a year before both Kirby's Dream Land and Super Mario Land 2, so this thing was really getting put to the test around this time. While they were able to add some enhancements from the previous game, they were held back in a couple areas, mainly due to the Game Boy's lack of color. So they had to get a bit more creative with some of the environment texture and completely change the look of Samus's Variasuit, which would actually end up becoming a core staple of its design for the rest of the series. Metroid II was initially released in November 1991 in North America, which I believe was one of the first times a first-party Nintendo game wasn't released in Japan at first. They wouldn't get it until January 21st, 1992, and Europe got it on May 21st. It sold over 1.72 million copies, so while it didn't do as well as the first game, it was still a success, and at the time reception was pretty positive, but it largely got overshadowed by the following Metroid game, which many people still consider the peak of the series. Though it was remade for the 3DS in 2017, which was a pretty big deal given how it was the first proper Metroid game in 7 years. I said proper. Though there was also that fan remake called AM2R, but that's a rabbit hole we don't need to get into right now.
Believe me when I say this has been a long time coming. It has been ages since I played the first Metroid game, and I really want to see more of the series. So let's pop this in, and hopefully my brain won't get probed this time.
The story takes place shortly after the events of the first game. After the incident with the space pirates, the Galactic Federation has made it their goal to completely wipe out the entire Metroid species. So they sent several teams of soldiers to the Metroid's home planet of SR-388. Unfortunately, none of their soldiers came back, so they once again hired Samus Aran to dispose of the Metroids for them. A simple enough story for the time period, but having your main character's goal be genocide is an interesting change of pace. Well, right off the bat, this game looks really impressive for the Game Boy. The graphics are honestly better than the original game on the NES, which is nuts. There's more varied environments, the enemies have better designs, and Samus has a much more detailed sprite, though her running animation can still look a little weird. And the soundtrack is pretty limited, but it does the job fine enough. The gameplay is similar to the first game, but there have been some tweaks. Once again, it's about exploring each area in a sometimes non-linear fashion while collecting upgrades and items, allowing you to progress further. Samus has lost most of the abilities she had in the last game for seemingly no reason other than the sake of keeping the gameplay loop. Later games will give various reasons as to why she lost her powers, but here it's just they're gone now. Sorry. Though you do still have a couple of abilities by default, like the Morph Ball, some missiles, and technically the Gravity Suit, though this is only really used like once. And you're especially going to need those missiles because where the game really alters is in the enemies, and more specifically, the Metroids. Since Samus's goal is to make them go completely extinct, your main objective throughout the game is to hunt down all 39 Metroids and destroy them. In total, the game is divided into 10 different areas. In order to open these up, you have to kill all of the Metroids in the previous one. The game isn't completely linear since there are some branching paths, but for the most part you have to go in a set order. Unfortunately, the game still has no map feature, so I'd strongly suggest looking up one online, especially since it once again likes to hide stuff behind destroyable blocks and fake walls that look identical to the other ones. Not just so that way you know where you are and where you're going, but also that way you can be sure of what Metroids you potentially missed.
But now let's actually talk about those Metroids, shall we?
Well, they aren't just the floating jelly brains that drain your life in seconds like in the first game. Instead, many of them have evolved into more powerful forms that are honestly much less threatening than the basic ones since they don't drain your life in seconds. There's 4 variations that get stronger and stronger as you go throughout the game, and to kill them you just need to shoot them in the right spot with missiles, with each one taking more hits. First, there's the Alpha Metroids, which just fly into you and go down in only 5 hits, so they're pretty easy, especially if you can stand underneath them. Then there's the Gamma Metroids, which can shoot a lightning beam and go down in 10 hits, the Zeta Metroids, which you only see like 2 of, and they shoot fire while taking 20 hits, and finally the Omega Metroids, which are by far the most dangerous since they move really fast, charge right into you, and take a whopping 40 hits to kill. These are the only ones that are as deadly as the basic ones. The Metroids all spawn in specific locations, and you have a counter that keeps track of how many you have left in the game, plus if you pause, it shows you how many you need to unlock the next area. The game itself doesn't really explain this, but each new area is blocked by what's supposed to be lava lava, and when you kill all of the necessary Metroids, the screen starts shaking, and if you go back, the lava is gone. Hunting down Metroids can be pretty simple, but it's still an interesting idea, and it's not a bad way to differentiate this from the previous game. I mean, it's a much less jarring sequel than the previously mentioned Zelda 2, so there's that, I guess. Samus's upgrades are mostly repeats from the first game. We have plenty of returning stuff like the bombs, energy tanks, missile tanks, the ice beam, the high jump boots, the wave beam, the space jump, and the screw attack.
Okay, the space jump wasn't technically in the first game, but all it does is let you flip jump continuously before getting the screw attack, so it's really nothing new.
But for new stuff, we have 2 new beams that still don't stack, unfortunately, and 2 things that modify ball mode. For the beams, we have the spacer, which shoots 3 small shots, and the plasma beam, which almost immediately replaces it since it's the strongest one in the game. And unlike the wave beam in the first game, all of these are required at certain points to kill specific enemies. For the balls, stop giggling, there's the spider ball, which lets you stick to walls, which is cool, though kinda slow, and the controls can be slightly delayed, and the spring ball, which lets you jump in ball mode.
But the biggest problem with the original Metroid, beyond how cryptic it was how unbelievably frustrating it could be. And for the most part, this game fixes that.
For starters, Samus is a bit more versatile in the shooting department. You can crouch and shoot now instead of instantly going into the morph ball, thank God. If you hold down the button, you'll keep firing automatically, and you can actually shoot downward while in the air. You still can't shoot diagonally, but it's definitely an improvement from before. But more importantly, the game is 100 times more forgiving when you die. It no longer uses a password system. If you want to save the game, you just need to touch one of these save points and hit the start button. Simple as that. And this also serves as your new checkpoint system instead of going back to the start of the area, since when you die, you go back to the title screen. This means you restart with whatever health you had when you saved instead of just resetting to only 30 every single time, which immediately makes the game so much easier. Now, you still don't have that much health if you save when close to death, but thankfully you can find these health restoration things scattered across the game, as well as these missile restoration things in case you run out of those. On top of that, the game is much easier simply due to the fact that there aren't really any bosses. The Metroids kinda serve as them, but they're more like mini-bosses, and even then, that's only the stronger ones, which don't show up until late game. Now, there are still plenty of normal enemies, which can be annoying since they respawn every single time you leave the room, and some of them move and shoot way too fast for their own good. Plus, this game still has knockback, which is obnoxious, and the jumping feels kinda floaty, which is not ideal, but it's certainly an improvement over the first game, though that doesn't mean it's completely free of garbage. Like getting hit by something I couldn't see, or having to be in the exact right spot to pass through this thing. But at least you don't have the risk of dying when going through a door this time. In fact, this game barely has any doors in it at all, aside from the missile doors that lead to upgrades, probably because I assume the Metroid spent most of their door budget on decorations. And blow. Mostly blow. I would talk more about the areas themselves, but honestly, there isn't that much to say about them. Huh? What the? Ah, dang it, the game froze. Okay, just gotta hit the old resetted. What the hell? What? Why am I stuck in a wall? What? Where did these walls come from? What? What? Huh? Genuinely, what is happening right now?
What the hell? Hang on 1 second. Piss off! Okay, there we go. Everything seems to be back to normal. Oh, come on!
As I was saying, the areas all feel pretty much the same. There's only a few that have anything noteworthy. Area 2 has you go through water, which I didn't realize since the only difference between it and the lava is that it doesn't have these little dots. I know the Game Boy was limited, but you didn't have to put water in here. Sure, hydration is important, but we're trying to kill the Metroids, so I don't see an issue with taking away their water. Area 6 has this part where you can pick any beam of your choice, though I just stuck with the plasma beam. And Area 8 has a part where you have to loop around in a circle, only to go back up and then fight your first Omega Metroid. Things don't really get too complex until Area 9, so let's just jump right to that. Well, okay, I say that and all it really is a straight line where you have to fight 3 Omega Metroids, and a word of advice, do not come to this place without full health, and especially full missiles, because otherwise it is literally impossible. I found that out the hard way. But once you get through, we only have 1 Metroid remaining, and we reach Area 10. You gotta use the space jump to climb up here and find this energy and missile restoration, but more importantly, the ice beam. Why do you need this? Well, once you go through this last spot, we see this big red egg, and suddenly the number of Metroids goes up to 9, which makes for a really cool and suspenseful moment, because much like the first game, the final stretch is a gauntlet full of Metroids. Original Metroids. Also, much like the first game, they require freezing and 5 missile hits to kill and can drain your health in seconds if you're not quick enough. This is the only part of the game that managed to kill me more than once. But once we're back to only 1, we reach the final boss, the Metroid Queen. And this fight is ridiculous, since what you're supposed to do is not clear at all. Basically, she'll launch her head out and spray these things from her neck. You can't just shoot her in the head with missiles, but what you really want to do is hit her when her mouth is open to stun her for a few seconds, go into the morph ball, and then roll into her mouth. She'll then retract her neck, allowing you to go into her stomach and drop bombs, which does massive damage, though your health is drained the entire time you're in there, so you can't afford to mess up too much. Once you learn that, this fight goes from basically impossible to honestly pretty easy. After that, though, we can leave, but along the way, Samus comes face to face with that red egg that hatches into a baby Metroid. The baby imprints on Samus, seeing her as its mother, and she finds that she can't bring herself to kill it. You then have to climb your way back to the ship as the baby eats all of the blocks that are in your way. Once you reach the top of this cliff and return to the ship, Samus will leave the planet with the baby Metroid in tow. Honestly, a really impressive piece of storytelling for a game on such a limited handheld. The credits roll, and depending on how fast you beat the game, you'll get a different animation of Samus, with her once again removing her suit if you beat it in under 3 hours. I was a little short of that, so she just ran in place the whole time and then did a little jump at the end.
surprisingly decent. While it can be frustrating at times and you basically need to look on the map to have any idea of where you're going, it's definitely an improvement over the first game, and while you're probably better off with the remake, which I will get to at some point in the future, if you still want to play this version, I think it's worth giving it a shot. Phew, no aliens this time. I guess blowing up their king made them realize that they shouldn't mess with me. Well, don't really need these anymore then.